Okay, can you see me?
Creative insurgents. Creative insurgents. Ah. Gents.
Hey everybody, this is Cory Huff with The Abundant Artist.
And Melissa Dinwiddie with Living a Creative Life.
And this is the Creative Insurgents Podcast,
where we are all about living a creative life according to your own rules. Woo!
Yeah!
Yeah!
So Melissa, living in France is not paradise.
Really? Gosh.
You know, even though it is pretty cool, it's not necessarily easy all the time. But that's okay. I look at it as a metaphor for everybody else. Even though you may be having the time of your life and doing the thing that you most want to be doing in your life. And as we've been saying to each other as we've gone through some challenges in the last few days, embrace the chaos.
Well, speaking of chaos, you know, there's embracing it, and then there are ways to minimize the chaos, right? And I'm about to start that with my Great ClutterBust, which I'm running for the second time. And the doors are open actually through the month. So if you missed the first day of October 1st, you can still sign up and get your studio cleared out, your garage of doom, your closet of doom, and enter the holiday season with serenity.
Where can people sign up for the Great ClutterBust?
You can find it at melissadinwiddie.com/great-clutterbust.
So in the same adversity talk that I've been having on finding a good internet connection here in France, which is a little weird, but true. And that is why I was not present when we interviewed today's guest.
That's right. I did the interview myself with Shirley Williams. I think you're going to love this interview, though, Cory. It's so Shirley just gives you the straight shot here, what it takes to really build a business around your art.
Well, let's go ahead and just cut right to it.
Let's do it. Well, today's guest is Shirley Williams, who is an abstract expressionist painter. And I am so excited to have Shirley on the show. I invited Shirley to be a guest on Creative Insurgents because she left a comment over on the Creative Insurgents website on the episode that we did with Jolie Guillebeau, in which she wrote, "I've been making a living as a painter for 20 years. It's rare to hear an artist be so candid and generous." And I thought, oh my goodness, she's been making a living as an artist for 20 years. I have to talk to this woman. So I've since had a couple of long, very candid conversations with Shirley, and what her blog comment didn't say is that not only has she been a full-time artist for 20 years, but she has pursued just about every way possible of making a living from her art. She has reinvented herself at least 5 times in the process, and she is a wealth of expertise and experience. So Shirley, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and expertise with us today.
My pleasure, Melissa. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and maybe talk to some of the other artists out there.
So one thing that you mentioned that I found really interesting is, you know, a lot of artists are struggling with underpricing their work. That tends to be a big issue for so many people, particularly women, but also artists in general.
Yep.
And to hear you say that your prices had gotten essentially too high.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that catch-22?
Well, when I first started working on my own, and I think I would give this advice to most artists, start low. You know, cover your costs, but you know, look at what other people in your sort of category are selling your work for. Be sure you cover your framing costs, etc. I was selling my work in the beginning for about like a framed work on paper for about $300, and was making my costs, and I was making enough to get by. Once I got into and I was selling a lot. It was getting to a point where I was raising my prices quite a bit, and I think that's how you raise your prices. When you end up having less work than what you're selling, then you raise it. But I would never raise it more than 10-15% at a time, and then see how it happened, and if it would sell, it would keep getting, you know, a little higher and a little higher. And by the time I reached the galleries, they were reached that market. they were selling the same piece would have sold for maybe $700 or $900. So they had gone up quite a bit in that 10 years. Once I got into the galleries, they of course doubled everything because they have to make their 50%. You know, that's what they charge. So the costs are very high. So then that same $1,000 piece was now $2,000. Then, as my reputation increased, and I was getting more involved with lecturing and you know, touring my work and that sort of thing, and museum shows, because I've also done that, and picking up American galleries, they found my work too low.
Oh.
Price too low. So the same $2,000 piece suddenly went up to $5,000.
Wow.
And once I did the museum shows, they were in the $6,000 range. So once I had to go pull back from the galleries, because I wasn't making any money. I'd have a show. I'd have to ship my work all over the States or something. Shipping costs were very high. Insurance, all of the other prices, the costs that go along with having a show, marketing, etc., plus the 50% commission, and traveling down to the show for the openings, etc. It was ridiculous because I might sell one piece at those high prices and make no money.
Wow.
So it was getting harder, and there would be people like in droves turning out to these shows, and it was ooh-ah, but it wasn't paying my bills, you know?
Wow.
And that's when I had to, again, think about what is it that I really want to do. I'm painting, but nothing, I'm getting lots of compliments, and I'm making a great reputation, but I don't know if I want to be famous. I want to make my living from this, you know? So I had to rethink about how I was going to market myself. And so thinking that I'm going to pull away from galleries, first of all those costs disappeared. So I was able to bring my price down again, although I had to be very careful because I do have collectors that have spent all those big bucks.
Right. So what did you do?
Well, I for a year or two, I just kind of sat on my hands and thought, maybe the economy will change, or maybe the galleries will pick up, and I just, you know, I was selling smaller work at lesser prices because it's the huge pieces that really sell for big bucks. And those are the collectors that would notice. So I kept the bigger pieces aside and just concentrated on marketing smaller pieces. And so I ended up with a lot of larger pieces. And then I had a show locally in my studio. I had an open studio and said, you know, I just got to make some room. And so I dropped my prices by half. And out of that, I sold most of them because then the collectors didn't feel so bad. They thought, okay, you're making room. Here's a great chance to, you know, I basically marketed it as these are pieces that haven't sold in shows that can no longer be shown as new work, right? So I would drop it down that way. So once I did that, the local market then became enthusiastic again because I had kind of exhausted the higher price clientele. There's only so many people that are going to buy a piece at that price.
Right.
Usually they want to buy it through a dealer or you know, that sort of thing. So that's how I basically managed it. I basically gradually tried this, tried that until I found my sweet spot, and now I can sell again, you know, at a price that is not internet ready. It's not, you know, I'm still playing with that whole marketing structure at this point. The pricing structure, I mean. But the way that I do price my work is on a per lineal inch basis.
So it's height plus width?
Height plus width, which is how galleries or professional galleries tend to do it.
Oh, they do it linear rather than square inches?
Yeah, square inches don't work out with different media. So they'll have a different lineal rate based on the medium. So if it's on paper and then plus the framing, or if it's on canvas, you know. So I've kind of settled down at a rate of for canvas, $35 per lineal inch. And that's to be, for me, the sweet spot at this point. I don't know. You know, and I don't know that I would drop it more because of my costs, but I would bring it up. And I may, you know, things well, you know, I will probably drop it for an open studio, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And is that, it's the same multiplier, that $35, no matter whether it's a 4x4 or 48x48 or whatever size it is, right?
Yeah. If you do it per square inch, your smaller pieces become too expensive. I think that's not how the galleries do it. And people think that's how they do it, but they do it per lineal.
Yeah, the difference between the smaller pieces and the larger pieces becomes enormous when you do it by the square inch.
Yeah,
whereas it's sort of
not fair, you know.
Yeah, it makes more sense because that's how I do it as well, as the linear inch.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you said that I so resonate with when we talked before is that you mentioned this as well just now, is that the biggest thing to be really clear about is what you really want for yourself. That's actually the very first lesson in the Art Empowers Me course that Cory and I run, and in our Creative Insurgence Handbook. One of the lessons is figuring out what you really want, not what television tells you should have or your mom tells you should have, but what do you really want for yourself? So, and for example, you have said that you can't do both museum shows and commercial sales. So,
no, I don't think that would work. I mean, it's a completely different market, and that's when I said I reinvented myself. There's one thing that's very constant if you want to be a professional artist, and that's change. That's the only constant. You know, you have to decide. When I decided, the day that I decided I wanted to sell my small, little boutique deli and not be a self-represented artist and go into the gallery trade, I had to give all that up. Because I had to give up all the, self-representation. They don't want you self-representing. They want you to be working for them. Then you get into the museum area, and I realized after I had a museum show that wasn't my cup of tea. Everybody works and they think, oh, one day I'll be in a museum. But getting there is a whole different story. It's a lot of work. You really have to give up that whole concept of being able to sell at festivals and fairs, and that's not professional. They don't consider that professional. You have to be very, you have to intellectualize your art,
right.
Not commercialize it. And I realized that wasn't what I was in it for, that I resonated more with the viewer at one-on-one and knowing my clientele and getting to know my collectors and my fans on a personal level, which is another thing that didn't resonate with me with galleries. Even though they made me a lot of money and it was great for my resume, they won't tell you who bought it. I just get a call, somebody in New York City bought one of your paintings. Oh, great, who is it? Because I'd like to send them a thank you card. They won't tell you, right? So, because they don't want you selling directly.
Right.
So you have to really decide what you want. And along the way, through these 20 years, I've realized that with my background, business and marketing, the museum world didn't really take to that. They didn't think of that as being normal. I should have been talking art speak.
Yeah.
And, and galleries didn't want me doing that either. They want the control. And what I've realized is that I'm the happiest when I'm in control of my own career. Now that means, nothing's ever perfect. That means that I work twice as hard because 50% of my time is painting and 50% of my time is direct like when I say direct marketing is interacting with my client base and my collectors.
Yeah.
And potential collectors. So these things, over the years are constantly bobbing and weaving, and you got to try things, and you got to be very clear what is it that you want. Because the minute I decided back, that I want to be in the galleries, then I focused on that, and I started sending out resumes and contacting galleries and doing my research and doing my homework, and everything else fell aside, and then become very successful very quickly. If you want to concentrate on internet sales, you got to focus on that. The last 3 months I've done nothing but study social networking and internet sales, and like when I do something, I kind of have OCD on it. I kind of do it all together. So now I'm ready, and it's and I know it's going to be successful because I have a business plan, I have a marketing plan, and people think I'm insane because I can paint on one day and I can do that on another. It just happens to be the way I do things. But I much prefer personally to be in control.
Yeah. It's so true. You really, I think a lot of artists go into that. I mean, I know I certainly did when I started out as an artist. I didn't really have a clear understanding of how different the various different ways of being an artist are. There's the museum artist, there's the fine art gallery artist, there's the street festival artist. There's all these different sort of ways of being an artist and working and making money from your work, and they're not always compatible with each other.
No. In fact, about 3 years ago, I was approached by. I'm now a licensed I'm published by a licensed international publisher out of Austin, Texas. And when they first approached me, I was I was about to open a museum show, and I was really wondering, should I do this? Will this kill my career? Which career do I want? It created this angst for about 4 months. And then when I finally agreed to do it, then I didn't tell anybody for a long time. I didn't tell my clients. I didn't tell my galleries because I thought I'm going to be blacklisted. I can't tell anybody.
Wow.
So, people think all these things, any one of these things that have happened to me, many people have said, oh my God, your career is made. You're going to be so rich. You're going to be so famous. And that's the other thing that I think a lot of artists don't realize. There is never one opportunity. There's never one phone call that's going to change your life, and all you need to do is sit in your studio and paint all day and be creative, and somebody else will make the money for you. It doesn't work that way. It does not. That's
right.
A dream that I still wish I could get, but it doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
So, a perfect example. I mean, how things can go sideways really fast. 2008, the recession started in September. I think that's when that 2008 collapsed, September. I had a show opening in February in Dallas, Texas of 2009. And this guy was an international art dealer, and he had already made a plan that we were going to have the show. This was before the recession. We had planned the show for about 8 months, and it was opening in February. And he said, "Okay, here's the plan. We're going to triple your prices. That's through the roof. The same piece was going to sell for $15,000. Wow. So he said we're going to have. He had all the clients lined up and all chomping at the bit. So he said, we'll have a show in Dallas, then we're going to do Laguna Beach, then we're going to bring you to London, England. We've got that lined up after that. We'll tour it. And then you're going to go into seclusion for a year and paint. We're going to do it again and double your prices again. So
my God.
He had a whole 10-year plan that we were going to, I was the thing, right? I was the next big famous person that's going to make him and me and everybody famous. And then the recession happened. So we had the show in spite of it. The turnout was great. We sold 3 pieces. And he said, the other 2, all the galleries the plans scuttled. We can't do it. So there's an example of how you can think you're going to make it, everything's going to happen. It doesn't. And in retrospect, I'm glad it didn't, because I'm not so sure I'd want to be handled like that,
Yeah. Well, I remember the other thing you said about when you did the museum show. I remember you saying that thinking like this is the big step. This is going to make my career.
Oh yeah.
That in fact, it's the first step in a career to being a museum artist.
Exactly. I thought doors were going to open magically from there. And it was amazing. We had an opening that there were 200 people there, and the press, and it was just, oh my gosh, I thought this is amazing. This was another opportunity that I thought was going to change my life, and it was very exciting. But the letdown after, I went into this depression almost, because I thought that was not what I expected. It was very clinical. It was it wasn't a creative endeavor. It was more of a clinical very sort of distant, off-putting thing for me. For some reason, I mean, other people might love it. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I don't tend to approach my art intellectually. You know, I'm much more of an emotional, abstract expressionist painter. It has meaning to me. You start talking about personal meaning with the curator at a museum, and they kind of go off. They don't want to talk that way. It makes them uncomfortable. And, you know, they start talking, you know, in this weird language that they speak. And I understand it, and I can speak it, but it isn't me, you know. So they just thought I was, I just didn't, it wasn't a mesh. It wasn't a fit.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I know the buyers that have bought my work that I've interacted with, whether it's via email or in person or whatever, they connect with that emotion, right? They're not really interested in some academic, intellectual explanation of form or something. They want to connect on a gut level.
That's exactly it. And then and that's exactly the part that was missing. There was no soul in the experience. There was almost an aloofness about art. And about art. You should not look at art as something with emotion. You should look at it as something as, like you say, academic exercise. And that just didn't fit with me.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because that's really the perception that I have gotten from those high-end galleries and museums, is that there's this distance between me and the art and me and the artist. And I've never really been able to articulate it that way, but it's really interesting to hear your experience.
And, you know, I think unless an artist has been brought up through that environment of the academic art world, it's a goal that I think is an empty goal. Sure, it looks good on a resume, and like I said, I'm very glad it happened to me, because I think forever, if I hadn't, I would have thought, oh, if I could only. You know, we all have that feeling, if I could only. Now it's, if I could only figure out the internet. So, you know, it never ends. You know, I mean, here I am 20 years later, and I'm still trying to figure it all out. There's nobody that has the answer for you.
I think that's really the important point, is the reality that it never does end, that we're always on this constant learning curve, and that it's not about the silver bullet, it's not about being discovered or whatever. It really doesn't work that way. And I know we've talked about that before. Let's talk a little bit about realism and about, you know, what artists tend to think often when they go into this notion of, I'm going to make a career as an artist, as opposed to what the reality is.
Yeah, I think that I've been very, very fortunate. I've had, through my experiences, I have collectors that, I've got a couple that are even billionaires, you know, and that's not to say to brag, but I know that the first time I had an opportunity like that, I thought, wow, they are so connected, you know, it's gonna lead to something. And one thing that I realized through all these people that I've met, and these wonderful people who've collected my work, is that you build your career one experience at a time, one person at a time, and one painting at a time. There is no, everything is new. You're only as good as your last painting, and that's the other thing. It's your work that's the most important. Like you said, it has to connect with people. If people don't connect to it, you can have every billionaire in the world collecting you, and it won't make a difference. So the expectation of finding either that perfect gallery or that perfect collector, that person who's going to discover you, that perfect agent. I've also had agents. None of them are perfect. You know, some of them don't pay. Some of them don't. Some of them you know better than they do how to sell your work. Some of them don't care about the work. They just want anything. You know, some of them care nothing about you. They just care about the work. Everybody is different. And I think that the expectations that an artist has is that they really want to just sit in their studio and paint. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, if that's really your goal, and you don't like marketing, and you don't like business, and you don't like talking to people, that's who you are. Admit that. You know, don't try to turn yourself into something else. But don't waste your life hoping that somebody's going to walk into your studio and discover you. You've got to admit to yourself that whatever you put out, you're going to get back. So if you're not doing the marketing, you're not going to get a lot of collectors. So everything has a price as to how you're going to, in terms of what you're going to get back.
Yeah, so well put.
It's getting back to what it is that you want. What is most important to you? And I think most artists really need to be very honest with themselves as to what their skill sets are, and the ones that they think they need, if they really want to develop, then they have to go out and find those skills. Just like I went out and found the galleries. I went out and, you know, found the collectors that I wanted. I targeted them and I went after them in ways that were subtle. I mean, I didn't go banging on their door, but I certainly, you know, kept at them until they paid.
So what did you do when you were targeting collectors, say the commercial collectors or private? How did you go about it?
Designers.
Yeah.
That was really, for me, that was very lucrative in the beginning. Corporations, interior designers are always looking for something. Now, again, with them, there is a downside. They're not that interested in the emotional side of the work.
Mm-hmm.
They're just looking for something that's going to look good on the sofa, over the sofa. So how I approached them, I learned this when I was in my video days, my marketing days, is that it takes about 9 to 15 approaches before somebody buys. People are shocked when they hear that. So I always just send out the occasional email. One of the things I did was, from the very beginning, every year I send out 100 handmade New Year's cards.
Mm.
They're actually hand-painted with my information, and I would send them out to targeted collectors, my collectors, people who helped me throughout the year. It was my way of saying thank you. Or, you know, come to the studio sometime, no obligation, just come and have a look. And after a while, you send out, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, they'll call you because they don't throw them out. They're sitting on their desk. And I've had, you know, I've gone to parties where people will come to me and they'll say, you know, I have every single one of those cards. And I love them because every year it reminds me of what happened that year. And of course, when they're ready for a painting, they call me, right? So that was one way. I used to have an open house and approach the press and do something, radio stations, do interviews. I just call people. You know, you just phone them and you say, hey, I've got an idea. I've got something happening. It's an event. I did a lot of fundraisers. For example, I worked with the symphony orchestra. Did a fundraiser for them. Did, you know, fundraisers for children, children's orchestra. Anything to get into the community. I think it starts with the community. You have to build your base. You know, the other thing that I think a lot of artists do is they think, you know, there's no clientele here. If I could only be in New York, or if I could, I had the same dreams, believe me. I showed in New York. It's not that fun. You know, it's, I think you really have to start where you are. Plant yourself well. Create a following. And people today are all on the internet. They all travel. They all love to talk about the new piece of art they just bought. The word will get out. But you have to be consistent. You have to consistently. Don't expect the first email to sell out. Don't keep trying to sell all the time. You know, if you're selling all the time, people don't want to hear from you. Be thankful, be grateful, send them some information, send them something. If you see an article in the paper, that's what the other thing I would do. If I saw an article in the paper about a collector, I would cut it out, mail it to them and say, you know, congratulations, or thought you might like a copy of this. And they'd call me, you know. So it's just using your imagination and figuring out how to get to somebody.
That's brilliant. That idea of sending out the hand-painted cards, 100 hand-painted cards every New Year's is so brilliant, and it really shows your focus on the long game, that this is not a get-rich-fast, get-rich-quick proposition.
It's not even a get-rich-slow.
Right. Like, I mean, yeah, talk about the I think there's an idea, and certainly when I started my business as a Katuba artist and a calligrapher, my business just grew and grew and grew and grew. Now, it was teeny tiny. I mean, it wasn't even, a living at first for several years, but it just kept growing, and I just believed that it would just keep going up. And then when the economy crashed, that was like when reality hit that, oh, it doesn't just go up.
No, in fact, ups and downs are a big, big aspect. You really need a fallback position. You need savings, you need a husband or something, or a wife, somebody with money, or a parent. You need maybe a part-time job. You need several income streams. I don't think that it's possible, especially in this day and age where there are so many people online, I hate to use that word amateurs, but people who are not really professionals, who don't take their creativity overly seriously. They're just out there trying to, hey, see if it sells. There's a lot of people like that, and a lot of it is very good work, but it's selling for very small amounts of money. So there are so many people selling art that the competition is really, really stiff. And I think if you really want to be professional, you have to be extremely focused, and you can make a living, but it's never an easy living. My gosh, if I wanted to be in this for the money, if I wanted money, I would have still been in the film business. Pretty good, but not, not by comparison to now. It's just right now. It's really day to day. You never can take anything for granted.
Well, what is your day to day like now?
I work as a job. This is my job. I get up, I go work out, and then I come to the studio, and I used to try to spend half a day painting and half a day working on the business, and that's really too difficult to stretch from right brain to left brain. It's just crazy. So what I tend to do is schedule a full day of painting, and then I just shut down every electronic device, and I paint for 2 or 3 days straight. And then I go and do my business for a couple of days and do that 2 or 3 days. And it's usually 10 to 5, 10 to 7, whatever. And a lot of weekends I'm sitting on my computer. That's when I really do my marketing, because the more I can do that, the more I can paint. So I really work hard. I'm working all the time. It's really my life. There's no alternative. It's not because I'm trying to make money. It's because it's just my life. I enjoy the people. I enjoy my clients, and I enjoy opportunities like this, meeting you.
I know. I think the days when I get discouraged, of which there are many, I think like, oh man, I'm never going to achieve the goal that I have for myself. But then I think, well, I'm not. What am I going to do? I'm not going to do anything else.
That's right. I couldn't imagine going back to a job. Meanwhile, I'm working much harder for much less money. Figure that out. But at least I'm happy. I'm enjoying myself, and I'm having fun. And I think when it gets right down to it, an artist really needs to think about that. Why are they doing it? If there's anybody out there who wants to be an artist to make money, they really need to get a different idea, because it's not a money-making scheme. Unless you happen to have something that's a really highly commercial idea and it sells like crazy, but then even that might be good for a year, and just like your Katuba experience, it can dry up overnight, and then what? How do you reinvent yourself? It's like being a one-hit wonder. It's not a long-term, long-range vision of yourself, and then you'll just end up being unhappy for the rest of your life. So you really need to stop, I think, and think, do I just love being creative? And if so, is that a hobby? Is that good enough? Or do I really want to make a living at it? And if I want to make a living at it, or even make a small part-time income, then you need a plan. You need to focus. First, what is it you want to accomplish, and how am I going to get there? And then if you don't have the tools or the knowledge, go figure it out and do it. Work your plan. You got to do it. It's really tough. It's a tough game, because being creative is a whole different set of skills than being business. And you kind of have to master both, and that's the hard part. The other thing that I think a lot of artists try to do is paint for the market. You cannot paint for a market. There's no point in going online and seeing what's selling today. Oh, it's red. Okay, well, all my paintings are going to be red. You got to be yourself. You got to be yourself, express your honesty, do it online the same way. Don't push too hard. Plan your work and work your plan. And then you'll get where you want to go, not where somebody else tells you you should go.
Wow, what a great way to
change.
Yes, and be prepared for change. Yeah, what a great just summary of everything. I would love to keep talking to you for hours, Shirley, but I'm afraid we're out of time. This has just been so fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
I would love it.
Great.
Okay. You're right, Melissa. That was really interesting. I really liked how Shirley just talked about what it's really like to be an artist. I think we need more of that.
Amen. Yeah.
So if you liked this episode of Creative Insurgents, we would love it if you would leave us a review on iTunes. You can do that by going to creativeinsurgents.com and clicking on one of the iTunes links there on the right.
And if you leave a review, we might just read it out loud on the air. Like right now, I'm going to read one from C. Mowers. She writes, or he writes, Lisa Call's advice is a must listen. I have known of Lisa's work since 2007 and admire her drive. While I do think she is an introvert, as she says, she has never been private about setting goals and following through with them. I've gotten to know her better personally and think her actions speak louder than words, although her words are equally important. Thank you for this interview. I've already shared the link with many of my artist friends. Woohoo! Thank you, C. Mowers.
Thanks a lot, C. Mowers. We really appreciate it. Again, if you go to creativeinsurgents.com to view any of our podcast episodes and then click on the iTunes link, you can leave us a review there on iTunes, and we'll mention you on the air.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Creative Insurgents. Creative Insurgents.
Subscribe at creativeinsurgents.com.